The restaurant was shining under bright lights, with polished tables and elegant decorations that made every customer feel special. The aroma of delicious food floated through the air, mixing with soft background music. Waiters and waitresses moved quickly, attending to the guests, making sure everything was perfect. Among them was a young waitress who had been working hard all day. She was tired, but she loved her job because it allowed her to support her family. She had learned long ago that kindness, patience, and a calm attitude could help her navigate even the most difficult situations. On this particular evening, the restaurant had a sense of excitement and nervous energy because a well-known Arab billionaire had decided to dine there. People whispered quietly among themselves, sharing stories about his wealth, power, and reputation for being very demanding. Staff members were especially careful, making sure everything was in perfect order. From the moment he entered, the atmosphere seemed to change. His presence was commanding. He walked with confidence, wearing an expensive suit and an air of authority. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and even the usual chatter among customers seemed to fade. The young waitress noticed him immediately. She had seen rich people before, but there was something different about him. There was tension in the way he moved, and it was clear that he expected perfection. She tried to calm herself, reminding herself to stay focused and polite, no matter what. She had been trained to handle difficult customers, but she knew that this situation would test her patience and skills. As the billionaire was seated, he began to place his order. He was very particular about what he wanted, asking questions about every detail. The waiters exchanged worried glances, aware that any small mistake could upset him. The young waitress watched quietly, listening to the conversation from a distance. She noticed the way his tone was sharp and demanding. Other customers were keeping their distance, sensing that this was not an ordinary dining experience. The billionaire's frustration started to show when his first dish arrived. It was slightly different from what he had expected. He frowned and called for the head waiter. His voice was firm, leaving no room for excuses. The waiters tried to explain politely, but he was not interested in hearing explanations. He wanted results, and he wanted them immediately. The young waitress could feel the tension in the room rising. Everyone was worried about how he might react next. She felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. She wondered why someone with so much wealth could be so unhappy even when everything around him was being done to please him. As the meal progressed, the billionaire's impatience grew. He tapped his fingers on the table, checked his watch repeatedly, and made small comments that made the staff nervous. The other waitresses and waiters were moving faster, trying to anticipate his needs before he even asked. The young waitress noticed how some of her colleagues were clearly anxious, their hands shaking slightly as they carried dishes. She reminded herself to stay calm. She had learned that staying composed under pressure could sometimes turn a difficult situation around. At one point, the billionaire stood up abruptly. He had been waiting for a dessert that had been delayed by just a few minutes. His voice was louder now, drawing the attention of other diners. He announced that he was leaving, clearly irritated. The young waitress watched in surprise as the staff scrambled to explain and apologize. It seemed like nothing they did could satisfy him. The atmosphere was tense, and for a moment, everyone held their breath, unsure what would happen next. The young waitress felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She had always believed in the power of kindness and patience, and she had learned a few words in Arabic from her family. It was not perfect, but she could communicate in it. A thought came to her mind. Maybe she could try to speak to him in his own language. She knew it was risky, but she also sensed that it might catch his attention. She could feel her heart racing, but she told herself that she had to try. Sometimes, taking a small risk could change the outcome of a difficult situation. As the billionaire reached the door, preparing to leave, the young waitress took a deep breath. She carefully approached him, keeping her voice calm and respectful. She greeted him in Arabic, using the words she had practiced many times before. She spoke politely, addressing the situation and trying to explain that they had been doing their best to meet his expectations. She added a small compliment about his presence, hoping to ease his frustration. The room went quiet as people noticed the interaction. Other staff members stopped moving for a moment, watching closely to see what would happen. The billionaire froze. For a moment he looked surprised and confused. No one had ever spoken to him in Arabic in such a direct and confident way, especially not someone so young and ordinary-looking. He turned his eyes toward the waitress, studying her carefully. The tension in the room shifted slightly, as the unexpected action had caught everyone off guard. The young waitress held her ground, speaking clearly and respectfully, showing courage despite her nervousness. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she remained composed. The staff and customers watched silently. It was rare to see someone challenge the billionaire's temper in such a polite and unexpected way. The young waitress had not only spoken his language but had also conveyed respect and calmness, which seemed to surprise him more than anything. The room felt still, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see his reaction. It was a moment that would change the course of the evening and possibly something much bigger. The billionaire's sharp expression softened slightly. He did not speak immediately, but his body language changed. The tension that had filled the room began to ease, just a little. The young waitress took another careful step, maintaining her calm and respectful demeanor. She knew that she had managed to get his attention, and now it was up to him how he would respond. The atmosphere in the restaurant was no longer tense in the same way. It was charged with curiosity and anticipation. Everyone in the restaurant began to whisper quietly to each other, amazed at what had just happened. The young waitress felt a small wave of relief, but she stayed alert, aware that the situation was still delicate. She had managed to interrupt his anger with something unexpected, and now it seemed like the billionaire was reconsidering his actions. The possibility of a change in the evening's events was in the air. As he stood there, the billionaire's eyes met hers again. He looked at her not as a simple waitress but as someone who had dared to step forward and speak to him in his own language. There was a moment of connection, silent yet powerful, that seemed to bridge the gap between wealth and ordinary life, power and humility. The young waitress felt proud and nervous at the same time. She had taken a risk and it had made a difference. At that moment, the young waitress realized that sometimes courage and respect could have a stronger impact than fear or obedience. She had learned that even a small action, like speaking someone's language or showing understanding, could turn a tense situation around. The billionaire's reaction, though not yet fully clear, hinted at something new, a possibility that the evening could end in a way nobody expected. The young waitress returned to her station, keeping a respectful distance, but her heart was racing with hope. She had faced one of the most intimidating people in the city and had done it with calmness and courage. The other staff members watched in amazement, realizing that a single act of bravery could change the dynamics of the room completely. The story of the billionaire and the young waitress was far from over, but this first step had set the stage for something extraordinary. The restaurant gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the sense of anticipation lingered. Patrons whispered quietly, some taking notice of the unusual encounter. The young waitress focused on her work, but inside, she felt a new sense of confidence. She knew that she had done something remarkable, even if it seemed small to others. The evening had started with tension, fear, and uncertainty, but it was slowly transforming into a story of courage, respect, and the unexpected power of human connection. The billionaire remained standing near the door, still processing what had happened. His usual expression of impatience and authority was softened by surprise and curiosity. The young waitress had done what no one else had dared to do. She had spoken to him in a way that made him pause, think, and notice her. The quiet strength she had shown was beginning to have an effect. In that moment, the restaurant became more than just a place for food. It became a place where an ordinary person could make an extraordinary impact. The young waitress understood that life sometimes offered these rare opportunities to step forward, to show courage, and to be noticed for who you really were. The billionaire's reaction would determine what came next, but one thing was certain. The evening had already changed in ways nobody could have predicted. After the tense encounter at the entrance, the restaurant slowly settled back into its usual rhythm. The young waitress returned to her duties, but her mind was still racing. She could not stop thinking about the billionaire and the way he had reacted to her words. She realized that she had captured his attention, even if just for a moment. That thought gave her a mixture of pride and anxiety. She knew the evening was far from over, and anything could happen next. She walked carefully between the tables, carrying plates and checking that every customer was satisfied. Her colleagues gave her subtle looks, some of them smiling quietly, impressed by her bravery. No one had expected someone so ordinary to speak to him in his own language, and yet she had done it. She had taken a risk, and for now it seemed to have worked. She reminded herself to stay focused. Courage alone was not enough. She had to continue doing her job well. Meanwhile, the billionaire had returned to his seat, but was still clearly unsettled. He had never experienced someone speaking to him in such a direct and polite manner, especially a young waitress. He was used to being noticed for his wealth, but now he was noticing her for something else entirely: her courage, her respect, and her willingness to step forward. He leaned back in his chair, observing her quietly. He noticed the careful way she moved, the way she treated each customer with kindness, and the calm determination in her eyes. For the first time that evening, he felt a strange sense of respect. The young waitress could feel his gaze on her, but she continued to work as if nothing had happened. She had learned that showing fear could make a situation worse, while confidence, even quiet confidence, could make a difference. As she approached his table with a fresh glass of water, she spoke softly in Arabic, asking if he needed anything else. He looked up, surprised again. Her words were clear, polite, and full of genuine concern. This small gesture softened him even more. He realized that her words were not just an act of courage. They were sincere. She was genuinely trying to help. After a few moments of silence, the billionaire nodded slightly. It was not much, but it was a start. He was beginning to see her as someone who could understand him, someone who was more than just a waitress. The young waitress felt a small wave of relief. She knew she had to keep her composure, but she also sensed that the evening was shifting. The tension that had filled the restaurant earlier was slowly giving way to curiosity and interest. As the meal continued, the young waitress found herself glancing at him from time to time. She noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He was less impatient, more thoughtful, and even seemed to be listening to the way she spoke to other customers. It was clear that he was impressed by her skills, her patience, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. She realized that her actions were starting to have an impact, not just on him but on the atmosphere of the entire restaurant. Her mind wandered briefly to her family. She thought about how hard they worked to make ends meet and how proud they would be if they knew she had stood up to someone so powerful and demanding. She felt a deep sense of responsibility. This was not just about her. It was about showing that courage and respect could make a difference, no matter who you were or what your position in life might be. She wanted to prove that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they acted with integrity and confidence. Meanwhile, the billionaire was reflecting on his own behavior. He had come into the restaurant expecting to be served without any effort, expecting perfection without consideration for others. Yet here was a young woman, humble and ordinary in appearance, who had spoken to him in a way that made him pause and think. He was not used to being challenged, and yet he found himself admiring her bravery. He realized that he had been harsh, and that perhaps he needed to approach situations with more understanding and patience. The young waitress had unknowingly given him a lesson in humility. As the evening went on, the young waitress continued to attend to him with care, speaking in Arabic when appropriate and remaining polite and attentive. The billionaire noticed every detail, the way she remembered his preferences, the way she handled other customers with respect, and the way she maintained her composure under pressure. He began to see her as someone special, someone who could manage challenges with grace and intelligence. The quiet strength she displayed was something he had not expected, and it made him rethink his assumptions about people and service. The other staff members noticed the change as well. They had been tense and nervous around him, fearing his temper and impatience. Now, seeing the young waitress handle the situation with skill and calm, they felt inspired. Her example showed them that courage and respect could influence even the most difficult people. The atmosphere in the restaurant was transforming from fear to admiration, and the young waitress had become the center of that change. The billionaire, still seated, began to engage more with her. He asked a few questions, curious about her background and her life. The young waitress answered politely, sharing small details about her work and family. She spoke with honesty and humility, never boasting or exaggerating. Her sincerity was evident, and it made a strong impression on him. He realized that this encounter was not just a fleeting moment. It was a meaningful connection that had the potential to change both of their perspectives. Throughout the evening, small gestures and interactions continued to build this connection. The young waitress would occasionally smile warmly, acknowledge his requests promptly, and even anticipate his needs. The billionaire found himself responding with more patience and even a hint of a smile. The tension that had dominated the earlier part of the evening had shifted to mutual respect. He began to see that her intelligence, kindness, and courage were more valuable than any service he had expected. He was learning something important, that true respect and admiration could not be bought with money, but earned through character and action. At one point, a minor problem arose with another table. A dish had been prepared incorrectly, and the customers were becoming slightly upset. The young waitress handled it skillfully, resolving the situation with tact and patience. The billionaire noticed this as well, realizing that her ability to manage challenges calmly was remarkable. He began to appreciate her not just for her courage in speaking to him, but for the overall competence and maturity she displayed. She had turned a simple restaurant job into a display of extraordinary human qualities. The evening continued with a growing sense of calm and understanding between the billionaire and the young waitress. She had successfully navigated a tense and potentially volatile situation, showing bravery, intelligence, and empathy. The billionaire, in turn, was beginning to change his own perspective, learning to value qualities beyond wealth and status. The small connection they were forming had a ripple effect, influencing the mood of the entire restaurant. Staff and customers alike were noticing the shift, inspired by the unexpected turn of events. By the end of this part of the evening, the young waitress felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced one of the most intimidating people she had ever encountered and had done so with courage, respect, and skill. She had not only managed to calm a furious billionaire but had also earned his attention and admiration. The experience was a powerful reminder that ordinary people could make extraordinary impacts through integrity, patience, and bravery. It was a lesson that would stay with her for a lifetime, shaping the way she approached challenges and opportunities in her life. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed subtly but noticeably. The earlier tension that had filled the room seemed to have shifted into a curious anticipation. Customers continued their meals quietly, but they kept glancing toward the billionaire and the young waitress. Staff members, who had been anxious moments before, moved with slightly less urgency, observing the interaction between the two with wide eyes. The young waitress continued her work with calm efficiency, but her mind was alert, aware that something significant was about to happen. The billionaire, seated at his table, seemed deep in thought. He had spent the last part of the evening quietly observing the young waitress, impressed by the way she conducted herself. Her courage in speaking to him in Arabic had been unexpected, but it was not just that. It was the respect, the calmness, and the intelligence behind her words that had made the strongest impression. He was not used to being challenged in such a way, especially not by someone who appeared so ordinary. His sharp eyes followed her every movement, noticing the careful way she handled other customers, the patience she showed, and the confidence she displayed without arrogance. The young waitress sensed his attention. She continued her work, carrying plates and refilling glasses, speaking politely to the patrons. At times, she would speak to him in Arabic, answering his questions or clarifying small details. Each time he paused, visibly surprised by her skill and the ease with which she communicated. She noticed the way his posture changed slightly, how his expression softened, and how his usual impatience seemed to fade, replaced by a curiosity that had never been there before. Then came the moment that would define the evening. The billionaire had just finished his main course and was about to leave, clearly indicating with his gestures that he had grown impatient again. The young waitress took a deep breath. She knew this could be the final chance to make a real connection. Gathering her courage, she approached him, speaking clearly and confidently in Arabic. This time, she did more than just answer questions politely. She told him a short story, a simple but thoughtful comment about life, respect, or patience. Her words were genuine and carefully chosen. She spoke with sincerity, her voice steady, her eyes calm but expressive. The billionaire froze in his seat. For a moment, he was completely still, his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes locked on the young waitress. Her words had caught him off guard, not because they were complex, but because they were unexpected. No one had ever spoken to him with such confidence, respect, and intelligence in a way that made him pause and think. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, the background chatter fading as all eyes turned toward the exchange. The young waitress stood there, aware of the silence but undeterred. She continued her words, making sure to maintain a polite and respectful tone. She spoke not to impress, but to connect, to bridge the gap between a young worker and a wealthy, powerful man. The billionaire listened, his expression shifting from surprise to a mixture of admiration and contemplation. It was clear that he had not anticipated this level of composure and understanding from someone so young and seemingly ordinary. The staff watched in awe. They had seen him furious, impatient, and demanding, but now his demeanor had changed. His eyes softened, and a faint smile began to appear. He leaned slightly forward, listening more intently. The young waitress had done something extraordinary. She had spoken to him in his own language with honesty and courage, and it had touched him deeply. He realized that her words were not just a simple response to his anger. They carried meaning, empathy, and insight. Other customers also noticed the change. Some whispered quietly to each other, amazed by the unexpected turn of events. It was rare to see someone stand up to a person of such influence and wealth without fear. Yet the young waitress had done it with grace and intelligence. The atmosphere in the restaurant was no longer tense. It was charged with admiration and curiosity. Everyone could feel that something remarkable was happening. The billionaire finally spoke. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, was calm and measured. He asked her questions about her life, her experiences, and how she had learned to speak Arabic so fluently. The young waitress answered with honesty and humility, never boasting, never trying to impress him artificially. She shared small details about her work, her family, and her life experiences, each answer revealing her integrity and resilience. The billionaire listened, genuinely interested, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed by her character and composure. As the conversation continued, a subtle bond began to form. The billionaire, accustomed to people praising him for his wealth or status, found himself valuing something entirely different: the courage, intelligence, and sincerity of an ordinary young woman. He realized that respect could not be bought, and admiration could not be demanded. It had to be earned through action and character. The young waitress, in turn, saw that even the most powerful people could be human, capable of change and understanding when approached with honesty and courage. The interaction had a ripple effect throughout the restaurant. Staff members began to feel more confident, inspired by the young waitress's bravery and skill. They noticed that even the most difficult customer could respond positively to respect and sincerity. Customers whispered quietly, admiring the young waitress and the remarkable transformation she had brought about in the billionaire. The atmosphere, once tense and filled with fear, was now one of curiosity, respect, and quiet excitement. As the evening progressed, the billionaire continued to engage with her occasionally, asking simple questions and listening intently to her answers. She responded politely and confidently, showing a balance of humility and assurance. Her ability to maintain composure, even in such an intimidating situation, impressed him further. He began to see her not just as a waitress, but as a person with insight, courage, and intelligence. The young waitress, though still focused on her duties, felt a growing sense of pride and accomplishment. She realized that her actions had made a lasting impact, not only on the billionaire but also on the staff and customers who were witnessing the interaction. The pivotal moment reached its peak when the billionaire leaned back slightly and smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. The young waitress had done more than calm his anger. She had surprised him in a way that few could. Her words, her courage, and her composure had created a connection that transcended wealth, status, and power. The silence in the restaurant was replaced by a quiet sense of wonder and admiration. Everyone could feel the significance of what had just occurred. The young waitress returned to her duties, her heart racing but her mind clear. She continued to serve customers with the same care and attention, but now with a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had made a difference. The billionaire watched her from his table, his expression thoughtful and reflective. He had come to the restaurant expecting to be served without effort, yet he had encountered someone who had challenged him, not with arrogance or defiance, but with honesty, courage, and intelligence. In that moment, both the billionaire and the young waitress experienced a subtle but powerful shift. The billionaire realized that true influence and respect came from human qualities, not just wealth or status. The young waitress understood the power of courage and sincerity, and how even a small act of bravery could change the course of events. Their interaction had created a rare connection, one that went beyond the usual boundaries of social hierarchy and expectation. As the evening drew on, the young waitress continued her work, aware that this encounter would stay with her for the rest of her life. She had faced a challenging situation with courage and respect, and she had succeeded in surprising and impressing someone who seemed untouchable. The billionaire, too, would not forget the young woman who had spoken to him in Arabic with such confidence and sincerity. He had been reminded of the importance of humility, respect, and the human connection that could transcend wealth and power. By the end of the evening, the restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm, but the impact of that pivotal moment lingered in the air. Staff and customers alike felt the significance of what had occurred. The young waitress had not only managed to calm a furious billionaire, but she had also left an indelible mark on him through her bravery, honesty, and skill. It was a moment that would be remembered, a true example of how courage and sincerity could create a lasting impression, even in the most unexpected circumstances. After the young waitress had surprised the billionaire with her words and confidence, the atmosphere in the restaurant continued to transform. The initial tension had been replaced with a sense of curiosity and quiet admiration. Staff members moved more confidently, reassured by her ability to handle the situation with skill and composure. Customers whispered softly, noticing the unusual connection between the powerful man and the humble waitress. It was clear that something extraordinary was happening. The billionaire, who had come expecting frustration and imperfection, now found himself intrigued. He watched her from his seat, observing not just her actions but her demeanor, her patience, and the respect she showed to everyone around her. He had encountered many people in his life, but few had managed to command his attention with such quiet authority and genuine confidence. He realized that her courage to speak to him in Arabic, coupled with her polite and thoughtful words, had left a lasting impression. The young waitress continued her duties, but her mind was fully aware of the moment's significance. She was careful, attentive, and polite, maintaining the same professionalism that had guided her through the evening. At the same time, she noticed the billionaire's gradual shift. His usual sharpness was softening, replaced by curiosity and respect. She felt a mixture of pride and nervousness, realizing that their interaction had created a rare and meaningful connection. As she approached his table to ask if he needed anything further, she smiled politely and spoke in Arabic once more. This time, her words were simple, yet thoughtful, acknowledging his preferences and expressing her hope that he was enjoying the meal. The billionaire looked up, his expression soft and reflective. For the first time, he saw her not as a waitress, but as an individual with insight, courage, and intelligence. He asked her a few questions about her life and work, genuinely interested in her answers. The young waitress responded with humility and honesty, sharing details about her family, her responsibilities, and her dedication to her work. She spoke with clarity and confidence, never exaggerating or trying to impress him artificially. Her sincerity was evident, and it had a profound impact on the billionaire. He listened attentively, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed by her character and resilience. He realized that the lessons she had unknowingly imparted were more valuable than anything he had expected from the evening. As the conversation continued, the billionaire began to reflect on his own behavior. He had approached the restaurant with a sense of entitlement, expecting perfect service without considering the efforts of those serving him. Yet here was a young woman, humble in appearance, who had taught him something unexpected. Her courage, patience, and respect had challenged his assumptions and opened his eyes to a different way of perceiving people. He felt a subtle but important shift within himself, recognizing the value of human qualities beyond wealth and status. The other staff members observed the exchange with amazement. They had witnessed his previous fury and impatience, yet now he was engaged, calm, and respectful. The young waitress had changed not only his perspective but also the mood of the entire restaurant. Her actions demonstrated that even ordinary individuals could create extraordinary moments through courage, honesty, and thoughtfulness. Staff members felt inspired, realizing that handling difficult situations with composure could influence outcomes in ways they had not imagined. The billionaire's interest in the young waitress grew deeper. He began to ask more personal questions, curious about her aspirations, her dreams, and the challenges she faced in life. She answered openly, explaining how she worked tirelessly to support her family and maintain her dignity and integrity despite hardships. She spoke of her hopes for a better future, of opportunities she wished she could access, and of the importance of perseverance and kindness. Each answer further impressed the billionaire, who saw in her a remarkable combination of strength, intelligence, and humanity. Throughout the evening, small gestures reinforced their growing connection. The young waitress anticipated his needs, offered polite suggestions, and demonstrated care and attention that went beyond routine service. The billionaire noticed these actions and responded with increasing respect. His previous impatience and sharp demeanor were replaced with an appreciation for her skills and character. He began to see her as someone capable of influencing him, not through fear or submission, but through authenticity and courage. The interaction between them created a ripple effect throughout the restaurant. Staff members became more confident, realizing that respect and professionalism could turn even the most challenging encounters into opportunities for connection. Customers observed the unexpected dynamic, quietly admiring the young waitress's bravery and the billionaire's willingness to respond positively. The atmosphere shifted from tension to a sense of engagement, where human qualities and mutual respect took precedence over fear and hierarchy. The young waitress, while attentive to her duties, felt a growing sense of accomplishment. She had taken a risk by speaking to him in Arabic, by asserting herself politely, and by maintaining her composure. That risk had paid off, creating a rare bond between two people from completely different worlds. She understood that her actions had shown not only her own strength, but also the power of empathy and respect in bridging gaps between social classes and life experiences. The billionaire, in turn, experienced a transformation. He reflected on his previous expectations, recognizing that wealth and power could not replace the genuine respect and admiration that come from observing courage and integrity. The young waitress had reminded him of the importance of humility and the value of human connection. Her presence and actions had opened his eyes to the possibility that ordinary people could teach extraordinary lessons through their actions and character. As the evening progressed, they continued to interact with a newfound sense of understanding. The billionaire listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and offered subtle acknowledgments of her efforts. The young waitress maintained her composure, attentive and polite, yet increasingly confident in the impact she had made. The dynamic between them had evolved from one of tension and fear to one of mutual respect and curiosity. The staff and customers continued to observe quietly, impressed by the rare display of human connection. The young waitress had turned what could have been a simple, tense encounter into a profound moment of learning and understanding. The billionaire, who had arrived with a reputation for being difficult and demanding, now showed signs of admiration and consideration, influenced by her courage and sincerity. By the end of this part of the evening, the young waitress had achieved something remarkable. She had not only calmed a furious billionaire but had also gained his respect and attention. She had demonstrated that courage, honesty, and empathy could transcend social barriers and create meaningful connections. The billionaire, for his part, had begun to see the world differently, recognizing the value of human qualities over wealth and status. Their interaction had created a lasting impression, a story that would be remembered and recounted by those who witnessed it. The restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, but the impact of the evening lingered. Staff members carried themselves with renewed confidence, inspired by the young waitress's actions. Customers left with a sense of having witnessed something extraordinary. The young waitress, though exhausted, felt a quiet pride and satisfaction. She had faced a challenging situation with grace, courage, and intelligence, and she had succeeded in influencing someone powerful and influential in a meaningful way. In that moment, both the young waitress and the billionaire experienced a shift that went beyond the immediate encounter. He had been reminded of the power of humility and human connection, while she had learned the value of courage and sincerity. Their story, born from a simple interaction in a restaurant, had become a powerful example of how ordinary individuals could make extraordinary impacts through their actions, character, and respect for others. As the evening drew to a close, the atmosphere in the restaurant remained charged with a sense of curiosity and admiration. Staff and customers alike had witnessed something extraordinary, a connection that had formed between a young waitress and a powerful billionaire through courage, respect, and sincerity. The young waitress continued her duties, her movements calm and deliberate, but her mind was aware of the significance of the events that had unfolded. She had stepped into a situation filled with tension and uncertainty, and her actions had created a lasting impression. The billionaire, who had arrived expecting frustration and imperfection, now regarded the young waitress with a new perspective. He had seen her courage, intelligence, and integrity, and it had affected him deeply. He realized that he had underestimated the power of human qualities beyond wealth and status. Her ability to handle the situation with composure and respect had taught him a valuable lesson about humility and connection. He was no longer simply a customer. He had become someone willing to acknowledge and honor the extraordinary character he had encountered. As the young waitress approached his table for the final time, she spoke politely, ensuring that he had everything he needed. The billionaire looked up at her, a soft smile forming on his face. He spoke slowly, in a tone that carried warmth and consideration, asking her about her future aspirations and what she hoped to achieve in life. She responded with honesty, sharing her dreams and explaining the challenges she faced in supporting her family. Her words were simple, but they carried authenticity and courage, which left a profound impact on him. The billionaire paused for a moment, reflecting on her words. He realized that he had the power to make a real difference in her life. The thought struck him deeply. Here was someone ordinary, someone who had demonstrated extraordinary qualities, and he could offer an opportunity to change her life in a meaningful way. He recognized the rare combination of courage, patience, and sincerity that she possessed, and he felt compelled to reward it. With a deliberate gesture, he reached into his pocket and placed a note on the table. The young waitress noticed it and picked it up, reading it carefully. It was a generous offer, one that could provide her with new opportunities for education, training, or a significant financial boost to support her family. She was overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that her courage and composure had led to a life-changing moment. Tears of gratitude welled up in her eyes, and she struggled to find the words to express her thanks. The billionaire watched quietly, his expression one of satisfaction and respect, pleased that he could make a positive impact. The restaurant staff looked on in amazement. They had witnessed the transformation, from a tense and demanding customer to a man willing to recognize and reward the extraordinary qualities of someone he had initially overlooked. The young waitress's actions had not only changed his evening but had also created a story that would be remembered and shared for its powerful message about courage, humility, and human connection. Customers whispered softly, impressed by the scene and inspired by the unexpected turn of events. The young waitress composed herself, taking a deep breath and thanking the billionaire respectfully. She expressed her gratitude for his generosity and for acknowledging her efforts. Her voice, though calm, carried emotion, reflecting the significance of the moment. The billionaire nodded, acknowledging her sincerity, and offered a few kind words, encouraging her to continue pursuing her dreams and to remain true to herself. This brief interaction, filled with mutual respect and understanding, became a defining moment for both of them. As the evening came to an official close, the young waitress continued her work, but her mind was full of hope and inspiration. She realized that her actions had not only changed the course of her own life, but had also left a lasting impression on the billionaire, the staff, and the other customers who had witnessed the encounter. She understood that courage, respect, and sincerity could create opportunities that wealth and status alone could not. Her experience had reinforced her belief in the power of human connection and the importance of integrity and bravery in the face of challenging situations. The billionaire, preparing to leave the restaurant, took one last look at the young waitress. He was struck by the contrast between her ordinary appearance and the extraordinary qualities she had displayed. Her courage, composure, and sincerity had taught him a lesson about humility, empathy, and respect that he would carry with him long after the evening ended. He realized that true influence and admiration came from character, not wealth or power, and that moments of genuine human connection were far more valuable than any material possession. As he departed, the young waitress felt a mixture of emotions: pride, gratitude, and a sense of accomplishment. She had faced one of the most intimidating individuals she had ever encountered and had succeeded in making a meaningful connection. She had demonstrated that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary outcomes through courage, honesty, and respect. The impact of this evening would stay with her for the rest of her life, shaping her perspective and reinforcing her belief in the importance of integrity and bravery. The restaurant staff quietly celebrated the young waitress's success. They recognized that her actions had set an example for everyone present, showing that courage and sincerity could influence even the most powerful individuals. The customers, too, left with a sense of having witnessed something rare and meaningful. The story of the evening, the courageous waitress and the billionaire who was moved by her actions, would be remembered and shared, inspiring others to approach challenges with integrity and bravery. In the days that followed, the young waitress began to see changes in her life. The opportunity offered by the billionaire opened doors that had previously seemed out of reach. Whether it was education, career advancement, or the ability to better support her family, her future had been transformed by her courage and composure. She continued to work with the same dedication and humility, but now with a renewed sense of confidence and hope, knowing that her actions had made a real difference. The billionaire, too, carried the lessons of that evening with him. He reflected on the importance of humility, respect, and genuine human connection. The encounter had reminded him that wealth and status could not replace the value of integrity, courage, and sincerity. The young waitress had taught him a lesson that he would never forget, influencing the way he approached people and situations in the future. The story of the young waitress and the billionaire became an inspiring example for others. It showed that even ordinary individuals could create extraordinary moments through courage, honesty, and respect. It demonstrated that human qualities, not wealth or power, could leave lasting impressions and influence outcomes in profound ways. The restaurant, the staff, and the customers all carried the memory of that evening with them, inspired by the transformative power of integrity and bravery. In the end, both the young waitress and the billionaire experienced a profound change. She had gained new opportunities and confidence, while he had learned valuable lessons about humility, respect, and the importance of human connection. Their encounter, born out of a simple interaction in a restaurant, had become a life-changing moment for both of them. It was a story of courage, empathy, and the extraordinary impact that ordinary individuals can have when they act with sincerity, bravery, and integrity.